the whole thing is theatrical. We could waste time as you going back to where did Mr. Zelensky come from? How did he burst onto the scene? And then you very quickly realize that this is not real. Entirely staged operation back in 2014. Something that's worth remembering, and very few Americans are aware of this. When Zelensky was elected, he was elected on a platform promising peace with Russia. And people, even in the far west of Ukraine, who normally never vote for him, voted for him because of that. Now, here's something else. When he was elected, he was only fluent in Russian. He could not speak Ukrainian. Well, I do know. I grew up with Ukrainians, and I knew that he could not speak Ukrainian. It was an embarrassment for the State Department. It took a few months to get him to be really fluent in Ukrainian. Ukrainian and Russian are not the same. They are different. There's a lot of Polish and Lithuanian in Ukrainian, also some German. So it's very different from Russian, but it's not so different that you can't rapidly master Ukrainian if you speak Russian, or if you are Ukrainian, that you cannot master Russian. And most people in most of Ukraine are bilingual. So in his case, it was just interesting to me that he was never fluent in Ukrainian and that he took this position when he ran. Well, obviously, he very rapidly changed his position, his orientation. So one wonders what anybody should believe that the man says. And, we have a long history of lie after lie after lie, terrible fiction about what's actually happened in Ukraine, which depicts, obviously, the Russians as evil war criminals and taking heavy losses and failing, and the Ukrainians as bright, shining knights of truth and justice and suffering very few casualties. In reality, the truth is about 180 degrees out, the opposite. Now, the Russian dead, if there is a number, and I haven't seen too many, but I've seen some estimates, maybe 20,000, 24,000 dead. The Ukrainians have now admitted that they have 35,000 Ukrainian soldiers missing in action. Now, the other point is that certainly over the last 3 months, given the massive counterattacks that the Ukrainians have launched against the Russians, who've essentially been in an economy of force role, just defending in the south, waiting for the buildup to complete for the coming winter offensive, the Russians have killed large numbers of them. The exchange rate, which was always about one Russian for every 5 Ukrainians, has now gone up to about one Russian for every 8 or 10 Ukrainians. So we think that they're closing in, probably, if you add the 35,000 missing to the total, which is reasonable, probably 140, 150,000 dead Ukrainians or more. Let's hope so. The problem is, when you bring up this issue of peace, you get some very disturbing answers. Just before I happened to be listening to Fox News, and on came Lieutenant General retired Keith Kellogg. And Keith Kellogg was advertised as former Vice President Pence's national security advisor. Well, he was asked about events in Ukraine, and he said several things, some of which were true and a lot of which were quite disturbing. One of which he said was, well, we're really in this war. We should stop pretending we're part of this war. And he's right. We're effectively a co-belligerent. We have no declaration of war. We've never consulted the American people. We've never gone through the constitutional process. So I think he's probably right. We are. The second thing he said, which was really disturbing to me, is that President Biden needs to become personally involved. And they said, well, what do you mean? Well, he needs to pick up the phone and he needs to tell President Putin that he's got to come to the peace table, or we will take measures to destroy the Russian army in the field. Well, first of all, I don't know what particular set of hallucinogenics he's taking, but short of nuclear weapons, we are not in a position to destroy the Russian army in the field, as he puts it, which simply means in the Ukrainian theater. And secondly, again, he's urging Biden to double down on threats.
You don't deserve to die this way. You don't deserve to be set up for defeat like the United States is doing. How could anybody view the United States as a friend? I mean, literally, we're not helping them win. We're helping them die. And that's been the case all along with every technology that we brought to bear on this battlefield, from the Javelin to the Stinger to the M777 to the HIMARS, even the vaunted HIMARS. It's not a game-changing technology. It's not like the United States are introducing Russia to the multiple launch rocket system. Fact is, I think Russia invented the multiple launch rocket system. The Katushka, the Grad. It's a Russian invention, and they have variants of it today that have greater range in the HIMARS and equal accuracy as the HIMARS. But the West has pumped this HIMARS thing up so much that it becomes this act of delusion where people say, oh, if we only had more HIMARS, if we only had more M777s, all that means is that, yes, you're going to kill more Russians. There's no doubt that the HIMARS is a lethal system, and Russians are dying because of it. But this is war. Russians are going to die anyways in war, especially against the second largest army in Europe that's received over $106 billion of capital infusion and material infusion from one of the most advanced military alliances in the world. If the Ukrainians can't kill Russians, there's something really, really wrong with the system. But the problem is they're not killing Russians in large enough numbers. When you have a 10-to-1 casualty ratio against you, it's problematic. Your burn rate, Ukrainian burn rate, is far greater than their replenishment rate. The United States was bragging the other day, we're going to train 8,000 Ukrainian soldiers every, I forget what the period was, 4 months or something like that, 800, maybe 800 every couple of weeks. But the Ukrainians are losing 800 a day. I mean, so I'm just a simple Marine, but the mathematics alone tell me, if it's a week, let's say they're going to do 800 a week. I think it's bigger than that. Let's say 800 every 2 weeks. But you take 14 days, multiply it by 800, the Ukrainians will run out of troops. Eventually, there won't be anybody left to train. Whereas the Russians have this small burn rate and this massive replenishment rate. They are getting ready to field the final elements of the 300,000 reserve mobilization. And that's on top of over 120,000 volunteers who have been recruited and trained at the time. The Russians, running out of tanks, I don't know. It seems to me that they have a whole bunch of advanced T-80 tanks, T-90 tanks, modern variants of the T-72 tank showing up on the battlefield. They're not running out of tanks, running out of cruise missiles. Geez, they seem to be launching dozens of them every day that are striking targets, not getting shot down. So this idea that Ukraine is somehow going to be able to absorb modern technology and allow that to turn the tide on the battlefield is absurd, and it's tragically absurd because the number of Ukrainian soldiers who are dead and wounded is criminal. It's a massive amount. We don't know the exact number, but there's good reason to believe that the dead number well over 100,000, and the wounded, easily more than that. And if this battle continues with this kill ratio, this momentum, etc., the Ukrainians could be looking at 250,000 dead soldiers by the beginning of summer, 500,000 dead by the end of summer. These are numbers that we associate with World War I, World War II type conflicts, but it's happening today, thanks to the United States, thanks to NATO, thanks to anybody who props the Ukrainians up and lets them believe they can prevail in a conflict that they were never going to win, ever.